Hello and welcome to CEO Insights. My name is Vitaly Giman, and recently I interviewed Dennis Conforto. Dennis was Executive Vice President of Retail for General Electric, and since then he also owned over 10 different entrepreneurial companies. So he's a serial entrepreneur and a great expert in leadership. So please watch my interview with Dennis Conforto. Welcome, Dennis. Welcome.
Thank you.
Dennis, I have a challenging question for you today because rather than the usual, we're going to give you the Great 5 leadership question. And that is, as a leader, we typically have this dichotomy. On one level, we need to create results. We need to deliver outcomes. We need to create impact, which means financial viability, which means profit, which means cost reductions, and fairly short term. We don't have time to play around because we have investors who want to have their money back, and we have the health of the company. On one hand, we have that, right? And it seems like it's always urgent. It's always firefighting. On the other hand, we have this thing called people we need to develop because, they're not all up for in leadership. They're not all up for even executing on time and on budget. And they're all at different levels of maturity. And so it feels like a lot of leaders are pulled in two directions. How do we reconcile the two?
Yeah, okay, so that's a very challenging question. And it is a question I've thought about for years. At one time in my career, I was a senior vice president of GE. And at GE, I noticed something that was really unique, and that was everybody, and this was back in the days of Jack Welch when he was considered the CEO of all CEOs at the time. And I noticed something that was really unique. Everybody I ran into at GE was a leader, and I thought over and over again about how that could be possible. How can everybody be a leader? And after I left GE and started many other companies, I discovered that one of the things that was unique about GE, though they never really talked about it, was a leadership engine that they had created in the company. Because to be a leader, you had to have multiple skill sets, and you had to use these skill sets all at the same time. Part of my career was as a retailer. And I just want you to think about retailing for a second. It's the largest profession in the world, and yet at the same time, retailing has no school that you can go to. There's no such thing as a master's degree in retail. But to be a retailer, you have to be an expert at everything. You have to be good at distribution and warehousing and marketing and sales, and the list goes on and on and on of all of the expertise that a retailer has. And that's not uncommon for multiple industries, whether you're in real estate or whether you're in manufacturing or whatever it is. There's lots of disciplines that have got to be there. And so a leader has to create people that are actually, in the end, equal to or better than him. A real leader measures themselves, not that they got up to the top of the mountain, but how many people they got to the top of the mountain with them. Because if you get to the top of the mountain and you're by yourself, you're taking a selfie. And the best picture to take for a leader is a picture that they're not even in. They're taking a picture of everybody else that they brought to the top of the mountain. And they're just not included in the picture because somebody had to take the picture, and you can't really do a selfie. And so the thought is, how do you do that? How do you create a leadership engine within a company? And I developed a technique called good, better, best, which is a goal setting routine. For example, you and I are having a meeting here right now. So everything in my mind is about good, better, best. So in this discussion that we're having, what would be good? Well, what would be good is that you and I became friends, we respected each other, and that's kind of the minimum. Can I do that? Yeah, I think I can do that. I think I can exit this meeting and have you not be mad at me. The second thing is then If that's good, what is better? Well, better is answering the question that you provided me, and the best is giving you an answer beyond what you thought I would give, which is what I would attempt to do here. In a company, good, better, best is really about growth, right? Because you want to get the best possible growth in that process. So in a leadership engine, it is who do you sign better? Who do you sign good? And who do you sign best? So let's say I had a company that was doing $5 million in volume, but I know that I can double my volume. So that's the best that I can do. So I want to get to 10 million. So my management team, the employees, are responsible for getting to the 5 million. My senior management team is responsible for getting halfway in between, which is 7.5 million. So they're going from good to better. And the rest, the gap, the other 2.5 million would be my responsibility. So each one is responsible for working their way up the ladder. Nobody's out of that loop. Now, this is where it becomes interesting. The senior management team has got that $2.5 million gap that they've got to close. So they have to do some unusual things. As the leader of the company, I have the right, the responsibility of a $2.5 million on my own. But because I'm the leader of the company, because I'm the CEO, the chairman, I get to break the rules that the other people don't get to figure out how do I get to the next level. So I may sign contracts that normally they wouldn't be able to sign because they're larger and they create more risk. And as the leader in the company, I am charged with that responsibility of managing the risk and what's reasonable. If I get to the 10 million, then the following year, I'm now going to go double the business again. So the management team is responsible for 10 million. The senior management team is responsible for the 15 million, but they now saw what I did to get to the 10 million to begin with, that other $2.5 million gap. So they get to, and now I've got to figure out a new set of rules to get to and then I repeat the process over and over again. As you do that, it drags everybody up into that leadership position. In other words, all the goals are clear. The responsibility is clear of maintaining and covering the base, getting up to a better position, and then getting to the best possible position. And so if you want to have a leadership engine, you've got to break down the responsibilities based really on a combination of volume, margins, and profitability. The other thing I can tell you that leaders do, which is really unique, is they measure growth based on the bottom line. In other words, and it's an interesting principle. I just gave you an example of top line growth. But the reality is what you're really trying to grow is the bottom line. So how do you do that? Well, the goal is set. How much money do I want to make next year? If you start with how much money you make, the calculations working to that level of money are backwards to get to the top line, as opposed to incremental thinking of saying, well, I want to grow my business based on cost of living index. And so I want 10% growth, and then everybody will look at that as normal. You'll notice that in all my examples, I'm doubling growth. Why? Because that's the difference between incremental thinking and quantum change thinking. If you want to have quantum change thinking, you have to ask the question, how much money do I want to make in the business? And that forces you, when you ask that question, you're not going to end up with incrementalism thinking where you're just trying to get ahead of inflation or cost of living. You're actually asking yourself a question that says, if I'm going to be a leader, a real leader, I'm going to ask myself the most difficult questions of all. How do I double or triple my profits? Which means that you may have to have growth that is just unprecedented. Once you ask yourself those questions, then the answers are completely different because you're asking yourself what I would call the impossible question. And great leaders always ask themselves the impossible questions, not the mediocre questions. And you can tell great leaders in 2 seconds by the questions they ask. And it's always, I'll give you an example of a question that a person asked Stephen Jobs, who built the largest market cap company in the world, Apple, from $500 in a garage. So now the question you might ask Stephen Jobs if he was alive today, Stephen, I want to build a multi-billion-dollar company. I don't have $500 and I don't have a garage. Take away even the minimum that he had, and then watch what a leader, a real leader, does. So it's really by asking ourselves the impossible question. Now, why is that a hallmark of a leader? Because leaders don't limit themselves. Leaders do ask themselves the impossible question. Elon Musk is a perfect example of a person who is leading multiple complex industries at the same time. And it is what if all the time. What if we did this? What if we could do this? Yeah, I know it's a ridiculous question. I know it's impossible, but if we noodle on this question long enough, we're going to enter the realm of quantum change thinking.
Wow. Wow. Absolutely. And I literally could feel as you were saying it, I could feel the energy of it. It's really stretching the imagination, stretching the possibilities. Leadership is not confined to a box, right? It's going way outside the box. The next question
Yeah,
I'll have.
in fact, you bring such a good, because it's one of my favorite analogies, thinking outside the box. What does a leader do? A real leader thinks before the box. They're not even in the box to think outside of it. And that is the trick of a real leader. You'll notice that they push the boundary so far that even when they're building something, you're actually creating a box. But a leader pushes the edge of the box or the wall of the box out so far that the curvature of the earth starts to move down, so they can't even see the box that they have created for themselves.
So it's a real mindset shift, right? It's not in the physical reality because it doesn't exist, but for them it's a mindset. It's how you perceive the world, right? Rather than physical thing.
Well, and some people are so good at this that they don't even think about it. There is a lot of people are just they're incompetent competence. In other words, they're not aware of their competency. They're incompetent at understanding it. So if you want to, real leaders understand their own incompetency. And so what they do is they begin to say, okay, I'm really good at this naturally. How do I get it so that I can teach other people? And they try to be competent in their competency. You see what I'm saying?
It's called,
and so they've got to fight this thing to figure out like how to train it. Like there's some things that I am so competent at that I have not figured out how to be get beyond being not naturally competent at it. And once you figure out your incompetency at something and you can study it long enough, then you can actually improve upon your natural competency and make it even better. It's a really kind of an unusual thing.
I think in psychology they call it unconscious competence versus conscious competence. The unconscious competence, you just do it because it comes naturally to you. But conscious competence, you reverse engineer so you can teach others, right? You reverse engineer yourself, and that's really difficult, right?
Yeah.
So
you want to become a conscious competent. I use the wrong word. You're using the correct phraseology. I use the incompetent competent, which is kind of not competent.
It's okay. I understand. The main thing is, how do we get what's in our head and teach others? Because if we can't do that, then we're stuck we're good at ourselves and we get stuck with the whole job of leadership and nobody else can repeat it, right? That's what.
Well, and this is the other thing about leaders. Leaders teach people to believe in themselves the way that the leader believes in themselves. And that is really the art form of it, because most people don't believe in themselves. And a leader believes in people more than the people believe in themselves. And once that catches on fire inside of a company or inside of somebody else, then the leader is giving them one of the great gifts of their life, self-belief.
Self-belief. Wow. So that's, I'm going to take longer for this interview because it's so great. I can't help myself. So, okay, so let's say our leader realizes that, oh my God, I've got this stuff in my head and I'm operating naturally beyond the box and this is how I operate. But, I've got an executive team who doesn't quite operate. And one guy is kind of technically competent, but, not really a leader. He's a technician. The other guy is a leader, but doesn't have technical skills. There's also, as you were saying previously when we talk outside, people are at different levels of competency and maturity and what they want in life. And you have 1,000 of them or whatever, 5,000 of them, and all need individual attention. How do you build this engine when everybody is so different?
Yeah, so this really gets into hiring, and this gets into the real crux of why most leaders, natural leaders, may not be able to reach their own potential. So you have an A employee, a B employee, a C employee. It's almost like the scale of you've got a 10. Right? 10s hang around 9s, 9s hang around 7s, 7s hangs around 6s, 6s hang around 3s, and 3s hang around with people who are in prison, right? So that's kind of the scale. And you can watch it in a large company where you watch this, go from a 10 to a 3, and the 3 has friends who are in prison. In leadership, real leaders really don't put up with that. They have, if you got an A player and a B player and a C player, they will get rid of the C player. They just don't. They just know that the C player is just a C player, and they just have to cut and move on. And the B player is barely acceptable. And it's only acceptable if they know and they have the desire to be an A player. So you're looking for a unique personality type. And a unique personality type is the coachable coach. Some coaches are so full of ego that they cannot themselves be coached. But finding a humble coach who is a coachable coach, and everybody in that group is a coachable coach, is where excellence is developed, because it is no longer about the leader and about ego. It is about success and success as a group. Well, that's why I gave the analogy of the person who was taking the picture of everybody on the mountain peaks. A real leader creates leaders. They're not creating a company. They are creating leaders that are creating a company. And if it is all about creating a company, the company will die when the leader dies, period. It's not sustainable. You have to have that leadership engine, and you watch them because they then become mentors. And you can tell a mentor and a coachable coach by the way that they talk. There's an interesting film clip of Elon Musk, and he's walking along and he's talking to kind of a nerdy reporter who asked him a question. He says, why, on a topic that is so technical that the reporter is actually guessing, and says, well, why can't you do this? And Elon Musk starts to answer the question. You can't do it. And he goes, actually, you can do it. And I should have thought of that. And you're right. That is a humble, coachable coach.
Yeah.
Who on camera is literally changing in front of the world at a person who was guessing at something that he figured out. And you could watch his brain working like he went through every possible mode and went like, you're right. And I'm going to change it. And whatever the change was not a little change. It was a significant multi-million-dollar decision in a casual conversation with a person who was guessing at like a thought.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's certainly, yeah. That's being humble enough, not being afraid to make changes, even to your own. Yeah. I
Well,
totally
you
agree.
have to, if you watch real leaders, they wage war with their own ideas. Because when they wage war with their own ideas, they are leading. When they wage war with the ideas of others, they are following. That's it.
Ooh. Oh, there's a piece of wisdom. Yeah, that's a quote. There's definitely a quote there. Wow. Yeah, that makes so much sense because yeah, if you can wage war, if you can challenge your own thoughts, then you can grow. If you're not, then you're always challenging others, right?
Yeah, well, if you look at Elon Musk, Elon Musk is never competing against anybody else. They are really constantly waging war with their own ideas.
Mhm.
There are lots of people following him, but he is clearly leading a series of multiple technologies. You know, most CEOs in an industry can only lead one industry. Now, think about what he's doing. He's in the car industry, one of the most complex businesses that you can possibly imagine. He's in the space industry. He's in the solar industry. He's in the boring industry. He's in the magnetic industry. He's in the AI industry. He's in the robotics industry. Yet all of that is geared towards one goal of I need all of this technology if I'm going to go to Mars. So while they're all separate and apart, they all vector into this. I'm going to create another society on a planet that is just almost impossible when you think about it. But I'm going to need solar, and I'm going to need to bore into the ground, and I'm going to need cars and moving around, and I'm going to need batteries, and I'm going to need AI technologies and robotics and you know, and it's all for that one goal. And while they seem disparate and apart, they're all part of the same strategy.
Wow. So it's like having a higher vision. It's not just the other vision. There is a whole other vision, and everything serves that. It's like a hierarchy of visions.
Yeah. So think about what I was talking about before: good, better, best. So
Mhm.
in each one of those organizations that are separate and apart, he's got a good, better, best going on to create the ultimate best, which is, can I get a group of human beings to live on a planet in our solar system and lead happy, productive lives? And also send them on a trip for which there's no return. Because that's part of their, you know, most people don't know that if you're signing up with Elon Musk, you're signing up never to come back. You're going to be buried on another planet. There's no
Wow.
coming back. Yeah,
Wow.
quite incredible. I
Yeah.
mean, that now think of the commitment that people have in that. And then you can tell all the levels of commitment that people have to make this stuff work. Here's another thing that's unique about leaders. Leaders encourage mistakes. They get in a meeting and the mistake is praised more than the accomplishment is praised. Why? Because only in the mistake are they learning. So think about the difference between Boeing and SpaceX. Boeing wants to create the perfect environment in a computer system with all of their simulations, where Elon's going, let's just blow the rockets up and just see, because we're not guessing what the algorithms might be. We're going to know for a fact. Let's just have enough technology and we'll just blow up as many of these things as fast as we can. And because we can blow these things up faster than they can come up with the algorithms for their computer stuff, we will beat them to space, and we will do it cheaper.
And Boeing almost went out of business recently, almost.
No, and they just sent a rocket up, and they couldn't connect with the space station. You know, it took them hours to figure out because their simulations, you know, didn't have enough data where he's got every piece of failure that happens in those structures, and it's quite amazing. You know, he has this mega rocket ship that he sends up, and all he wanted to do was get it up and then figure out how to land it, which they just did this last week. The biggest, rocket ever sent into space, and then bring it back down and land it. And he figured out the profit equation is, if I can land these suckers, then I'm saving money. It's like sending a airplane across country and landing it in Europe and then taking it to the junkyard. And then think how expensive the aerospace industry would be, or a airplane ticket would be, with that kind of expense structure. So, he just went in a completely different way. Why? Because he asked the question that other people wouldn't ask. And part of asking the question that other people won't ask is it acceptable for us to try and fail or not try at all? And the answer is yes. And we're going to sit in the meeting. Watch one day when the SpaceX rockets blow up, the kids and the young people that are in the room cheer and yell, and like, we're learning, we blew it up, and we got it halfway up. Yay, that was our success. And now we got all of this data to get it 3/4 of the way up, and then all the way into space, and then it blew up coming down, but we got it halfway down, and then it blew up on the launch pad or the receiving pad. They celebrate these failures in a way that is just profoundly unique, and we have to celebrate our failures. I have lots of kids, but I've always thought about when I was teaching my kids how to shoot a basketball, and one of my sons just shot, couldn't make one, and one of them shot on his very first shot and made it. He learned absolutely nothing. The one that was going like, shooting and short and then overshot and undershot and figured it all out was learning. The other one was blind doodah luck, which is the other thing that we have to be careful about when we celebrate leaders, because in every success, there is an element of luck. The percentage of luck and the speed at which it happens has a lot to do with whether a leader is really a leader or whether they were lucky. And if they are smart enough to give credit to luck and timing. The other thing about leadership is who the leader talks about. If they're talking about the team, then they're building up the team. So.
Wow. Well, I do have one last question, and this is probably because I know this is one of your specialties. Beside the kind of this kind of out of the box mindset, imagination, creating, what in terms of emotional qualities, like if you were a spiritual leader, what does a leader has to have here? Not just, they're obviously very, very intelligent people, high IQ, but there's a lot of high IQ people, but they're not leaders. What does it take to be a leader on an emotional level?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Great leaders have the two connected, and the heart side, the spiritual side, the interpretation of that is as different as it is the interpretation of the brain. We've got different personalities. So we talked about the amiable and the extrovert and the intellectual and the driver kind of personality. The spiritual side or the heart side of somebody is also just as complex. But if I was looking for a quality that great leaders have, the greatest quality of all to me is empathy. Empathy, the ability to see through the eyes of another and empathize, because people who empathize then understand what the intent is. So much of the world is spent on I got you, I caught you. They look for every word, and you see this stuff in politics. In politics, it's a blood sport, and there is no empathy, zero. And the political leaders, actually, along with the news media, actually take empathy out of the equation, and as a result misinterpret purposely what the intent was, because they're picking sides, and there's got to be a winner and there's got to be a loser and there's got to be demonization. And so people who have great leadership skills have this amazing ability to transfer themselves inside of everybody else that they come in contact with. I don't have to be, there was a point in my life where I was homeless, living on the streets of Seattle, completely homeless. I didn't talk to anybody for a year. I was raised later on by my grandparents, and my grandfather had me working for him. And so I was really bad at school because I was cutting 36 lawns a week, so I could never get my homework done. Everybody at school thought I was really smart, but my test results showed something else, that I was less than smart. And he would see my report cards and he would use the word like retarded, you're retarded. And it really had an impact on me. And when I was homeless, I was literally nobody going nowhere when I wanted desperately to be somebody going somewhere. And in that moment, in that year of my life, I developed a sense of empathy that did not allow me to feel sorry for myself, because I never wanted to be a victim. I never wanted to declare myself a victim. And as soon as I declared victimhood, I was passing on the responsibility of my sadness in my life to other people and blaming other people. And I just didn't want to do that. And I saw no value in it. And I didn't see how I would improve my life or the lives of others by being a victim or creating victimhood in other people. So I learned this ability to be empathetic, which meant that I could look at any situation and put myself in that person's situation. So inside of a company, I could see a young executive struggling. Empathy then is the one that puts your arm around them, and you're trying to say, you're not trying to speak to this, you're trying to speak to this. And empathetic people know how to speak to this, which is different than speaking to this. And sometimes when you're in front of a group of executives or you're having a corporate-wide meeting, you got to speak from here and here at the same time. Some people can only speak from here. That's a problem. Some people can only speak from here, and that's a problem. And you got to be able to turn both on, and you got to be relatable and relate to everybody that you are mentoring. And the basic element of empathy is love. So great leaders love. They love the technology because they love how it is serving humanity. And ultimately, it gets down to that. If you watch leaders, the great leaders, they have this ability to simplify everything in their design. So you take something like an iPhone. It is fantastic because its elegance is in its simplicity. It is so simple that people don't recognize how it doesn't even have a button on it. They used to have a button on it, and then they got rid of the button. They tried to get it as simple as possible and get it so that it was zero-based training. In other words, it was so intuitive that you could figure it out. Now, why do people do that? Because they love humanity. And so we get one life. We get our average of 70 to 80 years. It goes by extremely fast. I'm 72. So, based on American statistics, I've got a year left. So I've lived 98% of my life. Now, just think about me sitting here saying this to you. I've got one summer left, or one, whatever. I got one thing left. And what is all of this about at the end? And at some point in time, a leader's got to say, when I get to the end of my life, the arc of my life, what is it that I wanted to be? And what did I want others to be around me? And how did I want to feel about me? And how did I want to feel about them? So you got that man in the mirror, right? And getting the man in the mirror to be the same for everybody, including yourself, is your life's quest, because the way I see me and others see me may be two different things. And in fact, I know it is. And I want them to see me as I see me. And if I can't, I got to see me as they see me. And I've got to try to focus in that mirror the whole time, so that the man in the mirror that I see is the same man that everybody else sees. And then that's when you become honest with yourself, and you have empathy for yourself, but you have empathy for everybody else. Otherwise, you can never focus those mirrors together to become the one person that you are that everybody sees.
Wow, wow, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. So we've gone to a whole other depth of leadership, which is spiritual leadership. I mean, even though you could be Elon Musk, but there is a certain spirit. You're not religious, but spirit of love for humanity, love, giving out love to others. Thank you. That's a
Well,
really
some people, the spiritual thing can be generated by religion, or it could be, it's really funny to talk to an atheist who's spiritual, but they don't know they're spiritual. They're my favorite thing. And I happen to be religious, but I happen to be spiritual. But what I like about atheists who are spiritual and don't know that they're spiritual is they're so authentic,
yeah.
because they're just naturally good, and they don't have to have a god or a reason or anything like that. They're just good, and they're honest, and the mirrors align very quickly for them. So
in many ways, maybe the future business leaders are the spiritual leaders of our times, because they have.
well, that's true. In fact, time crushes everybody out. History crushes everybody out except the tyrants and the spiritual. The tyrants because they were so bad, and the spiritual because they were so good, and everybody else is lost in history.
Wow. So you have a choice as a young leader. You have a choice. Which one do you want to be? You want to be a tyrant or a spiritual leader?
Yeah, and you can see tyrants in business. It's all about money, and it's all about them, and it's all about, it's all cutthroat, and they do what they got to do to have their 5 minutes of success. I mean, to be great leaders have to live beyond their own lifetime. That's who we know are the great ones. And I mean generations beyond them, because time will turn everything into dust. Eventually, the pyramids will be flat. We won't know that they were there. In the same way with people. So if you think about where you're at in time, if I'm, a child, I know the generations, but my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my parents. But as I move forward, the great-grandparents died, then the grandparents died, then your parents die, and now you're on the leading edge behind you. So at any point in time, you're only known by 4 or 5 generations within your own family as you're moving out, and then you go off. And then within your family, over time, you're lost to your own family. So I did a calculation one time that figured out if I had my kids had as many kids as I had, and they all lived to be an average of 75 years old, that there would be 500,000 Confortos alive in 100 years from now, generated from me. But 5 generations from now, none of them will know who I was, unless I write something significant, create a piece of art or a piece of music, or I do something that I become a historical figure. And historical figures can't purposely make that for themselves. History just grabs them and throws them into a situation. The people who become historical never knew they were going to be historical. They were just, cruising along in life, and then all of a sudden they were put in the middle of a situation that they had to lead. So it's really kind of interesting. And when you think about it, life is temporary, so leadership is temporary, So your thoughts are temporary unless you do something that where you say, I'm going to change the world, and you create something that impacts the world, even if the world never knows that you were behind it. There are lots of people who have invented lots of things that the world never knows anything about. I try to write about them on LinkedIn. About once a quarter, I write about a person that somebody else got all the credit, but they were the person that did it, and try to take them out of the dustbin of history and make them live a little bit longer than perhaps they would have.
Oh, that's a kind thing to do. Very kind. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure. It took a whole turn that I didn't expect myself. If my audience wanted to read more about your wisdom, where would they go?
They can connect with me on the X platform. They can connect with me on LinkedIn. They can follow me on LinkedIn. They can follow me on Facebook. I will, and then from there they'll see other things that I am I'm working on.
Like your podcasts, you have I heard you have a political podcast as
Yeah,
well.
I have. I haven't produced the podcast. I've been working on the podcast. I love to cook, and I'm a really good cook, and so I've been thinking about creating a podcast where I'm cooking for liberals and for conservatives at the same time, and proving that we can have a discussion over dinner about politics. But I wanted to use an example of, let's say that Democrats were flour and Republicans were salt. In an item that requires less flour, if I put too much flour in, I ruin it. If I put too much salt, I ruin it. If I can mix the two together, I end up with a perfect flavor combination. So I was going to make 3 meals, one with too much Democrat in it, one with too much Republican in it, a perfect meal, and then make them eat both of their meals. And then my meal, which is a blend of finding solutions. And I don't mean compromise. I mean common sense. Common sense is not compromise. Common sense is not compromise. And there's common sense on both sides. It's just that reasonable people always come to the same reasonable conclusion if all the known facts are on the table at the same time. The reason that people are unreasonable is because their facts don't match up, and it's not on the table at the same time. So if you look at leaders, really good leaders, they also have this ability of, how do I get all the information, all the known information on the table at the same time, so I can come to a reasonable conclusion that makes sense, and get rid of the fights and arguments and egos inside of the company, which is a whole nother leadership discussion in and of itself.
We might have you back for a whole political, what is a true healthy political leadership looks like. We'll have another discussion on that one.
Sure, anytime. Sure.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate spending time with you.
You bet.